start up here with a Hawaiian shirt. Herbert? Just introduction.
Yeah, okay.
Just your name and then we'll move along.
Well, like you said what it was. Warren Herbert, planning commissioner. And, Nick Jones with the Livingston School District. Albert Arias, out of our school next door here.
I'm on Public Works.
Marcia McFadden.
Our newest member, welcome.
Almost.
Yeah, Catherine Show Rodriguez. I come to all these meetings, and I'm a local blogger about all this.
Alex Peterson, I figured it was going this as with Kennedy Jenks, and we prepared the first presentation.
David Mendoza, City Council.
What are you, finance director?
Purple Summer Town Drunk.
We're just doing that to see if we're paying attention. That's right.
Steve Spencer with AECom. We're doing the second presentation regarding well 8.
Jeff Black with Blackwater, assisting city engineer on
Gino Cooey is a citizen of Livingston. Nellie McGarry with Senator Cannell's office.
Oh.
and Rick Molina, public works director, and I get the lights.
And the coffee.
Of course, I'm Jose Ramirez, city manager. Okay, well, thank you very much. As you can see, our agenda is pretty packed. We've got quite a bit of information that we want to share with all of you. And so why don't we go ahead and get started. The first item of business on the agenda, of course, is the long-anticipated analysis for sustainable water treatment strategy that Kennedy Jenks has been working on. So just to give you a little bit of history, so this particular study was embarked on because the staff and council didn't believe that we were we were not going in a sustainable way, and so we wanted to make sure that we identified not just what the immediate next steps we need to do for this year and next year, but kind of outline what it's going to be for the next 5 years, and then what's going to be for the next 10, and what's going to be for the next 15. And that's very important, especially because you're talking about a huge investment, monetary-wise, in just about everything you can think of. Right now, as you know, any well that you're going to sink into the ground, you're talking about $2 million. And then you add treatment, and with all of the new parts per billion requirements and the fact that groundwater is being depleted, and the groundwater is going lower and lower, and there's more contaminants, and there's going to be new thresholds from EPA. The latest one, the next one up is going to be Chrome 6 and Chrome 3. So a lot of competing interests here, and we wanted to make sure that moving forward we had an engineering and scientific view of things that could give us the best recommendations that are out there, given the framework and the outline of the city, so that we can make decisions moving forward. So with that, Alex Peterson is here to present. We've had this document for at least 2 or 3 weeks, and he's going to go through it, highlights. Please ask all the questions you have, and we'll take it from there.
Just so everybody knows, this is not a formal meeting, so I mean, it's a meeting, but normally, probably, if you have a question, just stop them and ask it right there on the spot. You don't have to wait for the entire presentation. Just say, I don't understand, or you back up, or whatever. It's a lot of information.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of information, and we'll kind of be moving through it. Once we've gone past it, you might lose the question in the next piece of information. So as Jose had said, I think 18 months ago or whenever we started this, the question really was, how bad is it here for water supply, groundwater? You knew there was significant challenges on several fronts for contamination, and was surface water a viable option? Central treatment versus wellhead treatment? What way do you go, and even how much do you need? So really, what we're talking tonight about, a little bit, just overview of that again. Talk about the challenges with your water quality. We'll talk to understanding your demand and where that water gets used. So not just domestic, but certainly foster farms is a big component of how your water gets used. Their water, all of your water. What assets do you have? We've got several wells. What are the challenges with maintaining those? Surface water strategies. Certainly, as time goes on, a surface water conjunctive use, we refer to that as, is a very viable and significant move forward with a kind of a portfolio approach to your water supply. Something that we're asked to look at, as well as a few other things we talked about. And one of the things that we did towards the end of this was we said, well, we got a lot of information and strategies, and we've addressed feasibility, but there wasn't really that thread that had a 5-year approach or strategy in the report. So beginning of this year, as things were kind of heating up on what needs to happen now, we got together and talked about that, and that's where we put the 5-year strategy together. Purpose, the way I phrased it was to step back and review the following. What do you have? What are your existing assets? And what's the water quality? Because that's really the driver. Prior planning for growth. Where did you think you were going versus renewed perspective on where growth is going, revised projections. What's the feasibility of continuing, as you always have, with groundwater as your only source of supply? What's the feasibility of moving completely to surface water? Or again, conjunctive, both surface and groundwater. And then to add that development of the 5-year approach. That was really the purpose of this study. Development of the 5-year approach and the other elements went to costs. And if you look at the report, there's a lot of breakdown of costs. And we can dig into some of that if you wish. But water quality challenges. You guys have a bit of everything here. There's naturally occurring constituents in the ground. That's your manganese, and that's your arsenic. Those aren't anybody's fault, they're just there. Some of your wells are low and free of those, and some are not. It's very typical to have in Central Valley here a well. You go 1,000 feet of well, this one's going to be exceeding an MCL, maximum contaminant level for, say, arsenic. And this one over here is not going to have it at a high level or even at all. It's because of the way that the valley was formed with all the channels and sediments coming down. So it's not unusual to have some of your wells with naturally occurring mineral contaminants and some of them not. And you have that blend. Human activities. Nitrates certainly got a lot of press a couple of years ago. You have nitrate present. Well, 10 was shut down in part because of nitrate exceeding the maximum contaminant level. The existing wells, 2 of them are about half of that level. So it's not threatening seriously yet, but it is certainly something that's on the horizon potentially and could be in the future for you. DBCP and TCP. You have some DBCP, and that seems to be not increasing. However, this TCP is a constituent that is not yet regulated by the maximum contaminant level, but it is a priority after Chrome 6 for the state to set a maximum contaminant level, and you have some of the highest levels in the state. So you're certainly going to be over that threshold. They're not going through that exercise to have everybody under it. It is a known carcinogen. It's something on the horizon, and that was a big component of this study. Okay, what's the biggest element of pending risk? And TCP is a big element for you guys. So, well, 9, 11, 14, and 15. You have manganese in those at relatively elevated levels, but not over except for 15. It's not over. So those are elevated, but you're below the MCL. At elevated levels, though, manganese can create a nuisance. So some of your wells are high enough to create a nuisance. And that's an aesthetic issue. It's a service issue. Arsenic, you have arsenic in 12, 13, 15, and 16. You have treatment at well 16. And that has been upgraded and is providing reduction there. 13 is going to be an issue soon. We'll talk more about that. As I said, nitrate, you've got it in 2 wells at half the MCL, half the maximum contaminant level, but the others are lower than that. So your nitrates are present. Again, there's a lot of press in the last couple of years. UC Davis did a study in the Central Valley on nitrate. There's a lot of nitrate. It's continuing to become an ever-present problem. Where do you guys stand? 2 of your wells are half of the MCL. The rest of them is present, but not quarter or less. What's going to happen? Hard to say, but certainly gets a lot of attention on nitrate. We talked DBC a little bit. TCP is present in all wells. You have a hole. You have a well drilled. When I refer to a well, I think of that as the casing in the ground. You have a well drilled at 17, but it's not equipped. So it doesn't have the pump, it doesn't have the power, it doesn't have any treatment. So that well 17, the prior water quality results indicates that it would need manganese treatment. And I believe the arsenic was 6, if I remember correctly, and that is not going to require treatment. The current treatment threshold is 10. That's the maximum contaminant level. So 17 is an asset that you have. The holes in the ground, it's not equipped yet. It will need some treatment, but not some of the more exotic. Treatment methods, a broad brush overview. Manganese, and oftentimes iron is present, but you don't have the iron present. Often you hear it referred to as iron and manganese treatment. Very straightforward. You oxidize, hit it with chlorine. If you need to hit it a little harder, some other oxidants. You oxidize, you run it through a special filter, it comes out the other end, and the manganese and iron are reduced. You have to flush the solids out once a week. You create a residual that you take to your wastewater treatment plant and dispose of. It's not a hazardous material. Very straightforward. It gets done a lot up and down the valley. Manganese is not a difficult element to treat for. Arsenic has had quite a bit of progress over the last 10 years on treatment. One approach to treatment is you take a manganese type process and you add a chemical ferric chloride to it, and that'll precipitate the arsenic with that manganese. What you then generate when you backwash, flush the solids out, as arsenic, and you create potentially hazardous materials handling issue. Other very viable ways to go in the way that you're treating for arsenic is to use what's called an adsorptive process, not absorptive, it's with D, adsorptive. The arsenic is then captured on that filter media. It's just flowing through this material. It's captured on that and stays there. And when the capacity to capture is used up, that media is then removed from the vessel and disposed of. And those processes have the cost of media, which is probably something that you guys are talking about on well 16. So your well 16 is an adsorptive process for removal of arsenic. There's other ways to do that, and when we talk a little bit about some of the options in the future, if you have manganese, you can gang those together, manganese and arsenic together. Well 8 is probably going to be talked about GAC, granular activated carbon. That's going to get the VOCs, it's going to get the DBCP, get the TCP. So it's a carbon media that captures those elements as they come through the vessel. And when it's used up, again, you dispose of that. So processes for that, filter vessel, full of carbon. Processes for the others, different. You can't do manganese with GAC. You can't do arsenic with GAC. You can't do, so you need them both. They're in line. Nitrate. Nitrates say you can do it with what's called ion exchange. You're basically trading one chemical constituent for another chemical constituent. At the end of the day, you end up with salt. It's expensive. It's another process. If you had nitrate, TCP, and manganese and arsenic, you'd have 3 trains of treatment. And that's why I think, Jose, you said, hey, we need to look at this because we have a lot of potential competing ways in which we would have to address our water quality. So the next bullet is this blending feasibility. Well, what if I have some good water? Can I just blend this down and then my mixed solution meets the standards? That's a good approach for nitrate. So we figured that you did not have to have that process in mind, but you do have to bring the nitrate to some place where you have better water, mix it, and then deliver it. And that's born then the concept of central treatment through blending in this case, and then you could gang some of the other processes, and we'll talk a little more about that. Manganese, similarly, you have blending capacity, enough good water to blend the manganese down, but it's not in the right spot, all of it. Arsenic, yes, you have some, but again, it's not all in the right spot. You're building pipes, Nitrates looks really good for blending. TCP, no. You don't have anywhere near enough good water to blend down, and standards looking to be very low, and so blending for TCP is not a viable consideration. So treatment methods, some well-known, all of them well-known actually, but they aren't complementary. They have to go in line. We look at the city as if it was separated by a solid barrier, Highway 99. Now you have some pipes that cross 99, but we looked at north wells and bring them together to a central facility and then distribute them, and south of 99 wells. So the wells north for a minute, 8, 9, 11, 14, 16, you've got about 5,800 gallons a minute. That's about 80% of the water that you need. And that's good because on the north there's about 60% of the demand. So that works out pretty well. South, you've got a bit less, you've got 3,000 gallons a minute, but you also have well 17 in the ground, not equipped, but that's another potential 1,000 gallons a minute. And well 18, which was a number we came up with as a replacement for well 10. Well 10 had pretty good water quality except for the nitrate issues, and as a replacement for 10, we numbered it 18. What do these numbers mean? You know, when I typed that, it looked like I wasn't saying something nice, but those are percentages and ampersands. How much water do you need? The master plan had a very robust perspective on what was going to happen here. It had 5 years of successive growth of 14%, followed by 5 to 6%, 5 to 5%, 5 to 1%. A little bit of time went by, and then we were brought on to look at the needs, and at that time, of course, things had changed quite a bit. And although you had some of the more sustained growth in the county, it still was a very low number. So the working together with the city, we resolved that basically 1% for the 5-year period each year, followed by 3%, then causing it to get back down. And that was the basis for saying, all right, how much water are you going to need? And we looked at 2015 because it was a couple of years ahead. You say, all right, there's how much water we're shooting at. So the first bullet is how much water do you have? And that is measured in installed pumping capacity. Pumping capacity, I measure in gallons per minute. So all pumps running gallons a minute can run 24/7, 365. How much water can you produce? Well, you're not allowed to have that be your number. You have to have one well broken. So CDPH requires you to take the largest well offline to make this determination of firm capacity. So your firm capacity is actually a little under the 11.4, but you also have a well that's violating MCL, and that knocks you down to about 9.8 million gallons per day. So that's an important number, 9.8 million gallons per day. 2015 projected demand is about 11.4 million gallons a day. Where are you right now? 2013, I'm not sure where you are right now. 2012, you had low water use compared to 2010 and 2011. So if this year's been the same pattern, you're doing okay. But you're right up at the threshold. If you lost a pump on a day like today, you could be potentially a little short of water, which is going to reflect itself in low pressure first, and then really low pressure, and you have to respond. But that you're close to being short. So the 10-year period, though, is what the law requires I look at, and that's Title 22, and it says the maximum day being that highest 24-hour use day is the minimum criteria for an adequate water supply, and that's with, in the groundwater system, all of your wells and one offline, the largest one offline. Right? So right now, all wells running, everything online, you're okay. You lose one, nip and tuck. 2010 and 2011 water use by Foster Farms was about 6.7 million gallons per day on their maximum day period. The previous 2 years, it was about 4.4, and 2012 was about 4.4. So the law says we've got to look at that highest number, and we've talked about, are there steps that have been taken that provide firm barriers to that higher water use, and that would be something for the city to discuss with the partners. Foster Farms being the grid partner. Hey, what's your water use going to look like, and how do we manage to what you need, and those aspects. However, our report, looks at those 2 years as the higher number. That's what it says we have to do. The rest of the city, 4.7 MGD, it's about 41% of the water is the residents and businesses other than Foster Farms. So definitely the largest player in the water use. We made the statement, and I believe it's true, that you do not have available water supply for growth. At this point, you would be unable to demonstrate within that 10-year rule that you have water for development. Working through, Jose, as we've talked before, understanding if there's firm barriers and whatnot with Foster Farms using more water, what's their projections, that would be one place to look for recovery of capacity. If it's there. We talked about briefly blending, and we talked about briefly tonight centralized treatment. The alternative to centralized treatment is a treatment facility at each well. You don't get the opportunity to blend with that treatment at each well unless you still bring that water exclusively over to the location of blending. You cannot blend in the system. The first guy in line doesn't get the blended water. So we looked at 2 central treatment facilities. One north of the city, a central plant, which would be those same wells, 8, 9, 11, 14 and 16, and then south, 12, 13, 15, the new wells, 17 and 18. And it gets a little, it's a feasibility study. This isn't a preliminary design, because you might peel, for example, 1 or 2 of those wells off and do wellhead treatment. If all you need to treat it at 17 is manganese, then maybe that's something to treat there at 17. And then you gang the rest together. So there's still work to be done before that final alternative is developed and you move forward. But it's very feasible to gang these together and get the water quality you need. Everything's expensive. Existing treatment. Well 16, you have arsenic treatment. Well 8, you have GAC for TCP, and I think you're looking at maybe bringing well 14 there. If you are doing well 14.
Potentially, yeah, it's set up for that, correct?
Yeah, good. We'll talk later about that.
Sure.
So, you've got a leg up on some facilities in place. What other options are available for water? Certainly surface water was and is a valuable consideration for the city. Merced Irrigation District is an interested partner, I believe is a fair word to say, in bringing an urban customer into their portfolio. It has benefits regionally, it has potential environmental benefits, it has benefits to the community here. Water in California is very controversial, and certainly anything that feeds the San Joaquin is being looked at closely, and if you're not using it, you better have a good reason for why you have it. And so I think that through the IRWMP, the Integrated Regional Merced, yes, which Merced is a tributary to the San Joaquin, and a lot of that is the tributary to the San Joaquin issues. But this is the Merced River, absolutely. The Integrated Regional Water Master management planning process is supported by the state of California through the Department of Water Resources, and I believe you guys are very active in that, participating in that with everybody up on the watershed. And that is the vehicle for having a voice, for being able to participate in projects being offered for funding support through the IRWMP process. And I think the city's doing what they can right there and having conversations with Merced Irrigation District. The report talks about the cost of water. No matter what you do for surface water treatment plant, it's going to be a significant bite. There were alternatives on different treatment approaches and the different costs of those treatment approaches. Very broad brush, because water quality was known upstream. And so one of the first things that you may need to do is support some additional water quality sampling. And that's going to be tens of thousands of dollars to get a year's worth of water quality samples. From that, engineers can make a better determination of treatment feasibility and zero in on the cost. So surface water, you have an interested partner who has water, who has benefit from working with it. You have a benefit from working with them. What this will provide to the city would be the long-term reliability of an alternative water supply. However, the belief is at least 1 year in 7, there'll not be enough water for you to be completely supplied by the surface water, so you still need your groundwater. And that's what makes it conjunctive use. When the surface water is available, you relax your wells and use surface water. When you have then a dry period, you lean off and you start to use your groundwater. And that is really kind of the momentum statewide going if you can develop that portfolio water supply. Yes?
Question on that, that sounds great, but don't each system require different type of water treatment?
Absolutely. Yes, so the question being, aren't they very different, the water treatment? Absolutely. The surface water treatment plant is going to be pretty much at grade. It's not going to be under pressure. It's going to be chemical treatment. You're trying to remove particulate matter, the dirt. You're trying to remove the virus and Giardia, the organisms that make you sick. You need to take the pH and adjust it because the pH is aggressive. It might be an acidic water coming off of the watershed where the groundwater is basic water, the low pH versus a high pH. Very different. In the groundwater, we're dealing with mineral constituencies, man-made contaminants, and pH. In the surface water, you're dealing with pathogenic organisms, dirt, and then anything else that can spill in the water.
Wouldn't that depend,
Any pipe? I'm sorry, what?
wouldn't it depend on where you're getting your surface water from the river or from one of the lakes?
It sure does, yes, absolutely. So the 3 alternatives put into the report, 2 of them were from MID canals. And the canals, one of them had less influence of return flows from irrigation, and one of them had a greater influence of return flows. And neither of those are optimal. What we were concerned about with the downstream Merced River diversion that didn't use the canals was that you have higher turbidity events, turbidity being dirt. And so when you have these high winter turbidity events, you have to deal with that. But it's absolutely, give or take, if you have a lake, then you have body contact and you have more pathogenic organisms, and it's very different to the groundwater.
Yeah, the question was, if you were saying 1 in 7, you may have to rely more on groundwater. That means you have to have groundwater treatment facilities on standby, which doubles the cost.
Yes, yes. You have to have the groundwater facilities available, ready to go. That's right.
So you're sitting there 6 years out of 7.
You got surface water.
Yeah. But
1 year you don't.
Yeah, but the groundwater, you're having to have treatment, you're having to have sit there for 6 years and not really using it or relaxing it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's probably why it's not hanging around here for us to turn on, because it's very expensive to have the portfolio. Yes. Kind of a crystal ball for a second, though. Growth returns to the community, and you exhaust the ability to expand on surface water, on groundwater. Surface water becomes more difficult to get for irrigation. You're getting greater pressure on the aquifer because of increased pumping for ag, because of increased flows down the Merced to the San Joaquin. You might see declining water tables. You might see salts coming from Delhi this direction. You might see increased contaminants in the groundwater. So groundwater is higher risk. But I think you're stuck with a portfolio approach to growth in the future. And actually, the benefit is you have that option to look in the future. And Jose, a few years out before surface water could even be an option because of all the coordination and permitting.
That's correct. And so as part of analyzing all of this, any surface water treatment portfolio, you're talking, 10 years or further out. It's not something that we're looking at short term for several reasons. One, because we should be able to meet capacity for new growth with 17 and 18 that are currently being looked at. But this is something that it would be, it's to the city's best interest to having a flexible water supply and the flexibility of going back and forth, because every time you go to surface, if you have the ability to go to surface treatment, then you're giving the groundwater table in your area an opportunity to replenish itself. And so we're even looking at the possibility of working with MID to try to do groundwater banking and having some type of groundwater percolation ponds in the area to help the groundwater table in this area. Because with all the other things that you mentioned, you also have to think about land subsidence, which is another big issue in the valley here, and the cost of energy going up. Of course, that would be the same for whether you have treatment, surface treatment or well treatment. But in terms of that over the long term, trying to taper off, increasing costs, chemical costs, all that kind of stuff.
Right. And so in lieu, we were talking about a recharge from the initial step for relaxing on the aquifer, which I believe, and I think a lot of people share the belief, that there will be increased pressure on the groundwater pumping, particularly as more waters are dedicated to flow for environmental purposes. So there'll be more pressure on groundwater. That'll drop water tables, could impact quality. So the first way in which such a system with surface water of the city would benefit the reliability of the aquifer would be by stopping the pump when you can. And that allows the water to remain. But we like to think of that as recharging, because we did take it out, so therefore we get the credit for recharging. We call that in lieu recharge. The fact is you just didn't take it. So, it's...
But if you go into 3 square miles, more or less, say we relax our pumps a little bit, but we're surrounded by, so I mean, is that really going to impact the table, or is that we just relax the weather's got to be?
Well, that's why the big push for the integrated regional planning, because you're right. You guys are pulling out X number of acre feet, and is that a big piece or not?
Yeah, the state of California, as you know, does not have a statewide groundwater management plan.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Until it becomes a regional thing, it's not going to work for Livingston.
Well, yeah, and that's why we're hot and heavy with the IRWIC, because if our partners don't follow the big overall plan, we're all going to be in dire straits. So, and that's why we're part of this. There's a governance structure. Of course, Gene's part of it as well, and other folks. This is important that we look at it as a basin, because what one does in one area and the other one, we're all in the same boat, if you will. So it's very important that we follow this plan. And in addition to that, there's money, there's grant funds, so that the ratepayers here don't have to take on the full burden of all this money, because it's to the best interest of the whole region here, not the state, but the whole state, but more so to our basin. And that's why, you know, we put together a number of grant applications within this process so that we could, you know, that's why they're supported and scored high.
And you're absolutely right, that what you do, if you're doing it by yourself, may or may not actually benefit solely the people here. Maybe there's some benefit, and absolutely right. The IRWIMP, which is that Integrated Regional Water Management Planning Process, recognizes that, and the monies that are earmarked through the different bond measures, and the last cycle of Prop 84 available, would go to that regional support. Yes, sir.
When I first got on this committee, the first thing I wanted to find out is, you know, looking for surface water down the road, you know, 10, 20 years from now, because we know, nobody knows how much water is down there. Dickey's pumping their wells, they dig wells, and talking to them, that they're going around, they're busy as hell drilling wells. MID is pumping.
Mm-hmm.
And if you talk about if we shut our wells down, well, you know, you're not using that water, but you've got other people pulling that water out.
That's what I said earlier.
Yeah, that's,
Yes,
and I've been told that by.
and that's why that
And
concept of
they also had to drill deeper. The people that's got wells are not deep enough now, and they have to go down further. So what's going to happen in the future? That's what I'm trying to look ahead to, and I know everybody else.
So maybe you can talk about that real quick, Alex. Okay, if we have this type of a scenario, okay, we are looking at, if we're gonna have to go deeper, and that means we're gonna have to spend more money in drilling, because the deeper you go, the more expensive the well gets. We don't know the constituents down there, and the cost to remove them, and then on top of that, the energy cost, because now you're having to spend more in order to get it out, because you're going up further. So there's just escalating factors that, you know, start pointing, you know what, we have to look at another area.
And we also have to show the state that on the rates coming up, because we do have to raise the rates to get us out of the hole and get these jobs done, because a lot of these grants, you have to show that you're doing something to.
Yeah, they're not gonna throw good money on bad.
Right.
And you need to have your house straight.
Right.
And that's why this has to be a long-term planning effort, so that you can plan everything out, get on your feet, and then have a combination of federal, state, and local money, so that you can build these facilities that will, you know, get you, not continue to go up, but, you know, start tapering off.
So if I could get what you'd asked me to do, and then maybe we'll move on to the next piece, because I think it's an important point to say, well, can I talk to what the impacts of going deeper are, and what the impacts of changing water quality are. I can tell you my opinion, but the fact is it's uncertain. What is certain is that if we keep doing what we have been doing, it's not sustainable. And that overdrafting the groundwater table, absolutely poking more wells in the ground, drawing deeper, going below the Corcoran clay, getting into salt water, all somewhat draconian sounding. But the fact is, there's a lot of us around here, and we're all sucking out of the same, bowl. And so, being able to better manage the surface water when it's available, the groundwater when it's available, is that conjunctive concept. And it's going to cost you twice again as much, because you have to have capacity for both, so that you can rely on one when it's available, then you turn that off and you rely on the other when it's available. And it becomes a more expensive way than we did in the last 50 years, where we put in a hole in the ground and pump the water. It wasn't that long ago the arsenic standard was 50, and you guys were great, wonderful water quality. Change the standard, now you're not. So absolutely, there's concern about what we call TDS, salt potentially continuing to come this direction. There's concern that there'll be increased pumping, that as, depending on what happens with hotter, earlier summers, if those predictions are true, you'll not have the surface water in the fall months. Is that going to drive groundwater banking, mining? All that's going to happen. You also talked about banking. We hit in lieu for a minute. You don't pump, theoretically leave it in the ground, have banking. The other would be more active, what you're talking about, some spreading basins, And that's another proactive way to force water into the ground to allow an opportunity to get in the ground. A lot of that's happening south.
So when you have, if you can explain that, when you have wet years, you have access to 215 water, which then you can, it's really cheap, and sometimes.
It has to find its way into the aquifer, and that's what may be the difficult part here, is finding a place where you can spread it. For example, your basins where you used to have a wastewater treatment plant. If the hydrogeology is correct and that water doesn't just go down and find its way back to the river, if it actually goes down and finds its way to the aquifer, then you're banking it. You need areas to spread, or you can go down a well. Everything there is also pretty expensive, but water is expensive, and it's going to be expensive going forward. You got a comment or question?
No.
Okay, good.
Conservation. You know, a lot of countries that, they only have, sometimes we have 5 gallons of water a day, and we use what? Almost
250,
250
20,
gallons of water a day.
Yeah,
And all
actually, you
these
guys are pretty good.
lawns, we have any watering days. We used to have watering days in Livingston. I don't know if we have any of those anymore. But conservation seems like we're always just opening the tap,
Yes, yes,
thinking about, it's going to go forever.
absolutely. Water conservation practices, 20% reduction by 2020 under state law, SBX 7X7, mandating that. And certainly if you were a surface water only facility, there'd be a bigger hammer over your head.
Yeah.
As groundwater, there's a water right at the staking hammer on you. But conservation is a component, responsible use is a certain component. We also looked at reuse. So we looked at wastewater, using that. It's more expensive to reuse that wastewater than to build a water treatment plant.
When we get credit,
Isn't that much available?
when we get the credit for putting our wastewater in the aquifers, let's charge it.
No, not yet. Good idea.
We need to start selling it to MID.
But no credit yet. No credit.
Well, that
So
should
the
be
reuse,
credit.
although you have some water, it's too expensive to get it to the level of treatment you need. And then the other component is to deliver it. So getting it from the plant back up to where you could use it. And you might run into some community pushback if you're starting to irrigate parks and schools with reclaimed water, although meeting all the standards, it is a question mark. Is it really good, which I say it is, but so what? The other thing that we looked at was, for example, using MID water out of canals for irrigation as a way of using a lower quality water than groundwater for offsetting the demands. And that too was fairly expensive, and but we need to go forward. I think that the alternatives we had developed were rather robust. Certainly, there's easier ways to get water out of those canals and irrigate. So it's not that that it's impossible or even maybe a debt issue if the MID is willing to do that, to shed some of your park demands and your school demands to MID water. But basically, when we got around at the end of the day, it was those aren't that big a supply to really offset what's going on, and that you're going to need to face groundwater treatment, and we believe right away, and that you should consider strongly pursuing surface water so that you have a portfolio and the ability to make decisions in the future whether you're going to go that way or not. The city is participating in the IRWIN, the Integrated Regional Water Management Planning process, and you have a seat at the table, and they're here at your table tonight listening to this, and that goes to being able to bring in bond funding. The people of California vote every once in a while. That's good to spend money for this sort of stuff, and that's great.
But
This is plain.
the state has $500 million for.
That's a different thing. We'll talk about that a little later. Yeah, that's different money.
That's $500 million.
Yeah, that's different money. That's SRF. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, I just wanted to add just one other little piece with regards to, looking at groundwater and then also looking into the future down the road for surface treatment. When you have wellhead treatment, where you always have to look at, depending on what the constituents are in the water, you have to constantly look at okay, do I have enough property around that well in order to put in these vessels for treatment? And in certain circumstances, there's some property we can just build. In other circumstances, there's not, like well number 8, where we had to actually purchase additional property in order to put in these vessels and so forth and so on. So that's another added cost that has to be looked at and that they took into account.
Uncertainty, absolutely. The risk of sustainable groundwater is much higher. So Chrome 6, that's MCL is coming out, maybe slowed down a little bit, but it's going to be here in the next year or two, if not this year. That would be another type of treatment system, potentially. Ion exchange or biological treatment system. So, we had 3 in a line at your worst well. Let's add a 4th one for that. TCP doesn't have an MCL yet, but it will. They're rationing down some of the nitrates, maybe down in the future. Some question about the nitrosamines. Remember that came out in bacon and beer and all kinds of good stuff. We put it in ourselves, but we can't drink it in the water. So, and then the TDS issue about salts. And if you go deeper, then salts are present at deeper, greater depths. So groundwater absolutely has a higher risk for mineral constituents. Surface water used to be a higher risk for biological pathogens, but the rules have ratcheted down over the last 25 years significantly, and the surface water is very safe. So absolutely, a lot of risk. Near-term challenges. Requires treatment to meet the minimum supply, long-term ability to meet growth. Where we sort of stalled 6-8 months ago was, okay, yeah, when did we do this? And we got this $22 million alternative. How do we move forward? So that's just develop a 5-year approach. Improvements to well 16. Well 16 was equipped and operated, and then needed to have refreshing of the media. And we're talking about that a little later. I believe we've done that.
It's in the final stage.
Yeah. So this first year, improvements to 16, improvements to 8. So you hear more about that. Your tank. Tank's part of your water system. We weren't talking about the tank as a supply. Tank is for a daily peak. When everybody turns on their faucet at once, you need to be able to meet that, and you're not going to meet it from the well, you're going to meet it from the tank. Your tank had equipment failure. 50, 60,000 to fix it, or did you get it for 30,000? Equipment failure, and wow, it comes along. Demolition, you have 2 wells that don't pump. Well 7 and well 10, there's nothing on there's no pump, it's not equipped. But you need to destroy those wells. You need to go down and rip the casing, fill it with concrete, and eliminate that vertical pathway for contaminants to get into your wells. The CDPH, the health department has come and said, you got to do that. And those are going to be 30, 40,000 a piece to do that. Some of them have features on top, so they might have a bit more. We've given you a number for that. So, and then we had said in there, really your lowest hanging fruit right now might be to go and equip well 17, because it's a good looking hole in the ground, and maybe you're just trying for manganese, make sure everything can fit on the site, and that could be a good place to go first. So the first step of the 5-year plan was, hey, this is something you can get your arms around. Second year, these things take time to roll out. So designing, bid, and award of the South Central plant, and we said ore. And the ore came out of our discussions about that $455 million of safe drinking water state revolving fund money versus there's another SRF, but we'll call this just the SRF. EPA had come out and said, why aren't you guys spending your money? They actually came out with a non-compliance order and said, if you don't really think you need it, we're going to take it back. And CDPH had to submit a recovery plan and a strategy for how they were going to use that money. So the first year, which was 12-13, they rolled out, I think, $265 million, of which 210 went to one agency, which it bumped their numbers up nicely. It got money moving, but that's not think, what we'd like to see them reaching out to communities like you guys. Then you guys are a flagship of where money like that should be spent, the 455. So when the pre-applications, the process for SRF is they come out with a period for you to apply with a pre-application. And so Jose had us put together, what did we put together? Four applications. I've got it on a slide following up here. Pre-applications for tens of millions of dollars for SRF funding. You want to talk to CDPH about what the benefits are for a community like Livingston to be able to access that money. And you need access to that money, you need money quickly because you have wells that don't need an MCL, haven't for a long time. You're short of water. This is a very viable type of solution that perhaps that money was intended for. So as we've talked, we got those applications.
Yeah, and of course, Nelly from Senator Wells in the back, and of course, Heidi Pedroso and from Congressman Costa's office, and also Greg, they're all familiar and know about our needs here, so they know that the next step is to actually submit the full application.
Yeah. So what we put together for the pre-applications was the two central plants separately, so those are fairly large projects. But we also put together some individual projects of smaller magnitude. So if ours would be look and say, gee, we'd like to help you out with everything, but really if we do this, then you're whole for a while. So maybe that's the solution. But 2014, 2015, it'd be good to be designing, get ready to bid and award at least a couple of projects for whether it's a South Central Natural One project or wellhead treatment at a couple of sites. That would put you in line on track for constructing those so that by the summer of 2015, and this is all very accelerated, by the summer of 2015 you could have that construction underway, so by the summer of 2016 you would begin access to that water. At this same window, 2015-16, you'd be potentially designing the plants for the north. Manganese is high there. You're addressing some of the arsenic issues, if not all the arsenic issues. You've got some of the TCP addressed. There's no standard yet, but it's coming. But manganese is high. And that's, although not at an MCL yet, it's close. And it's a nuisance. It's definitely an issue for fossil farmers as a nuisance.
Well, we got another problem too. Our water lines all through the city are 2/3 done. So we got to come up with money or a grant to get the other third done to get it complete. Because
So 2/3 reconstructed?
Yes.
Or done as in the age and ready to go?
New lines in,
Okay.
because some of them go back to the 20s, I guess.
They don't go back anymore.
So that's the other.
Absolutely.
thing we look at.
Yes. Yes. Infrastructure is in a bad way.
Go ahead.
Yes. Well, you're absolutely right. The tank painting and inside and outside needs to be, certainly inside needs to be addressed, and some repairs. We debated where to fit this in the mix and what the more pressing issues are. Would you take your tank offline and you do some modest repairs versus doing some more significant repairs? What we concluded was let's put it off a couple of years, not very many, and that's why it's out there year 3, 4. So design the paint coating system, did the recoating, and get it done there in 16-17. By then, by the year 16-17, we would expect to see the TCP MCL. So at that point, there'll be a compliance schedule, and you may have 5 years to comply. And at that point, then it may begin to be notifications of violation, and you could go another 5 years, and pretty soon somebody's suing you. It's not good, but it's definitely coming to the planning board. Wrap it up. very aggressive things to get done, but it's really because you're in a position of not having a lot of options if you want your water supply to meet standards, which you don't have that much in place. 4.3 million year one, excuse me, 8.4 and 7.3. Those might actually lag out a year. You know, I took and committed them all in the beginning of the year, but you wouldn't have to draw until the end of the year when you're paying off the construction contracts, and so they may actually stagger out a little bit. That takes the first bite in years 1, 2, 3, and year 5 would be equipping for the TCP. Whereas if you look at the feasibility plan, it talks about $22 million. This phased approach may have some additional costs in there. I'm sure that those are pretty much the kinds of numbers you're looking at. That's not surface water. This is groundwater. Surface water is similar sort of numbers. Safe drinking water, state revolving fund, the pre-apps. Those are the numbers. And it sounds like you're in communication and lobbying for the city's interest, which is the right step. We should be getting close. Thank you for sticking with me. The regulatory actions, actually, I think you're under. Isn't CDPH saying you need to conserve?
Yep.
They tell you of mandatory conservation.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's kind of tough because half your customers in industry, I'm not sure what the flexibility is for conservation there. Well, 13 is come back online, providing water. You're under an interim operating guideline, which is allowing you to do quarterly samples, but you may already be in violation because 2 quarters or 3 quarters kind of mathematically eliminated on ever meeting the MCL. So 13 is you're going to give notice to delivering water above the MCL for known carcinogens. So I'm saying. Well, 15, it has manganese again, a nuisance. It's not a health impact. It has discolors laundry, it stains materials. You may be able to receive a waiver for several years to deliver that water if the community supports it. If not, then you'll be again in a semi-enforcement action to deal with water over an MCL. You have a couple of other wells near the manganese MCL also. Again, nuisance right now, and significant nuisance for the Foster Farms up here. TCP, absolutely, it's coming. MCL, Livingston is in all of your wells. You have, unfortunately, some of the highest levels in the state, so certainly you're going to be in violation of whatever MCL will come up. It's just how low they're going to go. And the plant will take it out no matter what. It's just how long the GAC lasts.
That's how it works.
Yeah, perfect. Next steps, firm up your capacity, which I think is groundwater in the beginning. Work with CDPH. Plan for and participate in conjunctive use. Keep doing what the city's doing, and participate in the RWMP. Have a seat at the table. There's regional benefits that go both directions on that. And that's what the state is looking for in funding these types of activities that provide environmental benefit, they provide water conservation benefit, they provide water quality benefits. All those together are the types of solutions that are being encouraged and then supported through funding. And that is my presentation.
I kind of read the report. I don't know if I adjusted it. It really brings out the need to do something here in the city. I mean, everybody, not everybody, but all the cities are looking for water. You know, San Francisco's not shopping. That's just had a problem with their water. And if this report, I think, is well written. I think our city leaders should kind of read it and start looking for, take your suggestions. I think groundwater versus maybe surface water, probably those tanks. I hasn't been the one you call it. And I think that's my own solution. And I think, as I said, I read it, and I think it really brings up an issue.
Yeah, good, good. It was developed in a collaborative environment, a lot of support and input from your city leadership is on board with these concepts and the big challenges being faced, and so we appreciate that feedback and kind of offer it back. And it seems like you have a good city that's looking ahead, and you have a seat at the table with IRWNP, you have people looking for funding, you have people thinking about how to just keep things going right now, wheels on the cart financially until you get to the point of doing things. But it seems like you've got leadership here on board too.
Yeah, we've got good leadership, as far as I'm concerned. The thing is getting down to numbers now, because we're gonna have to get the rates up and trying to convince our citizens that, you know, I've been telling them, the rates are gonna have to, we had a recall over all this.
Yes, so I have a sense of the history.
And trying to convince the people, it's gonna go up again, and nothing like before, but it has to, we've gotta get money in the pot, in the kitties.
Well, I'm pretty sure there's money out there, as I said, I mean, federal government, state government, or whatever, they can start applying some of these funds, because I think your report really brings up the need for to do something, right? Because water is becoming the liquid coal before it was oil, and oil is still is, but it's coming to the liquid coal. A lot of those cities have a lot of money to buy that water. I know that San Francisco is shopping, and I don't know if they may be in the Oakdale district, and TID or MID refused them, and so they're out shopping before they come out. Yeah. I mean, it's a liquid gold, and I mean, you should do something about it.
LA wants to take our money, our water too.
I have a question for you. You kind of hinted through and I kind of went through ways to remove certain constituents. One was, you said for manganese, and I think you said arsenic, I don't remember the one was to use some sort of, you said chlorine or something to, yeah, and you said that you remove both or something, it becomes a hazardous material type thing, or?
Arsenic, I'll run through it again. The manganese is what we call in solution. It's going to stay in the water, it's going to be clear, and you're not going to see it until it's oxidized. And what chlorine does is it oxidizes. And it oxidizes the pathogens, the organic stuff, it kills them, but also chemically changes the constituents. So it oxidizes the manganese. And when manganese is oxidized, it then falls out and precipitates. So what's happening now is that manganese is precipitating in the pipes. What the treatment for manganese has a media like a green sand or a pyrolusite or a potassium, anyway, a medium, which has a preference for manganese. It basically detains the manganese until it's oxidized, and then it's in that filter vessel so you can backwash it. So you get dark coffee-looking backwash water once a week from that treatment. So that's manganese. Arsenic now often exists in the same water stream, can be unoxidized, ionic configuration that'll drop out or not. So you need to chlorinate it, you need to oxidize it also. But you need to give it an iron source, which is the ferric chloride red chemical. So now you have this ferric chloride and the arsenic coming together, and then that filters out on top, and you backwash it. So now you have a red, brown, black solids. If you accumulate that, you may have a material which is a hazardous waste that you own it, cradle to grave. That's a big deal.
Here's a question I was leading to. In order to remove manganese and arsenic, you said it's basically two different chemicals with the same removal media, correct?
Yes.
Now,
Can be. That's
okay,
one. That's
basically
one.
this is just a backflash and flush it out and you can use the media again, correct?
Over and over again.
Okay, so this was the question I have, and whoever wants to answer is, what's the potential to have it treated like a hazardous waste type thing, and versus having to replace the media on a continuous basis? Because otherwise, we're.
You have to look at the numbers. You
Well,
have to,
that's how I was giving to staff, to look at that as well. Just because if you can reuse, because usually the media is what's cost more over the long term. Because I believe well 16, the media is what, replacement media is what, $300,000, something like that, or? Right, $200,000. So that's a big chunk of change. If you can go that point to get rid of the natural occurring manganese and arsenic and use that media over and over and over, well, if you can look at what is the potential for hazardous waste, you know, how much is the cost?
yes, and it's a very delicate.
Well, this is
decision-making process.
No, I'm just asking them to
Right.
look into it. I'm not saying just go that route.
No, and I understand it. So there was a community down the valley, south of Hanford, that installed arsenic treatment as a process that I described, not the absorptive process, which is the other one we're talking about, which is what you have at 16. And so that community was sending the backwash solids, red, brown water to their landfill, and then it would end up out in the solids, out in the sludge, which was then a high-quality sludge, which was then routed to farm property, inmate farm operations, and they pretty well contaminated a lot. I don't know if that's settled out of the courts or, you know which one I'm talking about? No, it's it's not Corcoran, maybe it's Corcoran. Anyway, I don't want to give the wrong name.
Well, name's not as
So they were going that way, thought they had it okay, but they didn't, and got in trouble.
I mean, can that waste be disposed of? Because there's hazard removal companies all over the place. You know, and now, one thing to look at is how much it costs to remove that hazardous waste versus what the media changes too. I'm not talking about holding it and sending it out, but I'm talking about, you know, I mean, I'm just looking at an idea of, it takes $100,000 to have that waste hauled away versus $200,000 to.
Right.
I mean, it's all about numbers.
And you definitely hit the nail on the head with the issue with arsenic residuals management, which was underappreciated when the rule came out.
Mhm.
The cost was not included in its economic evaluation, but it's a big deal. And maybe that's something where
Just
you're
think
going.
about, you know, kind of look into it, you know, guys.
Yeah,
Everybody here.
thank you.
Yeah. Come on.
One thing to consider, hazardous waste is what.
Yeah, I realize that. That's what I'm saying.
You own them for life. If they never go away, they belong to you.
Yeah, but
they don't get paid.
if you pay to have it hauled away, somebody
It
else.
still belongs to you.
You still own it.
It's still,
Yeah,
it's
you own it
still
forever.
your responsibility.
They take it, dump it, it's still your problem.
Okay, then explain to me, and again, in the layman's way, okay, I'm laying out here. Whether you catch it that way or through the disposal media, constituents are still there. You
Yes.
still own it one or the other.
Yes. It's whether it got classified as a hazardous waste initially or not.
Okay.
It's a very delicate type of evaluation, and it's a risk management consideration. And it's
And with everybody's luck, we'll consider that in another.
well, exactly. So if you said, you know what, we're going to take a process that we understand it's efficient, and we know what the product is, and we know, boom, that decision's made. That's one of them. That seems like the path to take. You know what you're doing with residuals. It's not a question mark. What might happen down the road.
It was just food for thought, basically. You know, and we gotta-
But you hit the nail on the head. Residuals management was absolutely not thought through in the risk and cost evaluation in the rule setting. However, the arsenic MCL, many people believe is rather high, and that the health impacts are still significant from arsenic. So, you know, I'm glad I don't have to set rules, just to figure out a way to deal with it.
Okay. Ms. McLean, do you have any questions? Well, everybody just kind of jump in, there's no.
Yeah. No, I'd like to see them go back to that 3-day watering day. It just irks me no end. But Warren and I discussed this quite a bit. I can't understand why they don't do stuff, you know.
They know that.
We know. Okay.
So one of the things Jose was reminding me to maybe touch a little more on is the benefit of blending. And that means bringing multiple wells to a single location so that the mixture, when measured,
Diluted.
yes, you might be able to dilute a well with arsenic with a well with manganese, you put them together, and you're within the regulatory requirements, versus having to treat this well over here for arsenic and treat this well over here for manganese.
I was always wondering about
And
that.
that's why we brought the central plant concept together.
The samples at the well then, or
Yeah.
at the well, or?
Samples are at the well.
So, I mean, how would that affect your?
No, excuse me, right now your existing samples are at the wellhead,
Right.
but you would sample
If you
for
blend it.
delivery
Yeah.
at the point of delivery,
I got you, okay.
post-treatment. Yeah.
Post-treatment.
And so what the report recommends is that you could blend to very near the MCL with manganese, arsenic probably compliant depending on things staying stable at 13 and 15. Nitrate you can blend away, no problem. TCP you can't blend. So the initial was GAC or TCP at both north and south.
GAC is granular activated carbon.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe I've got this thing
Yeah.
inside and out.
And then we included in the south treatment for manganese and arsenic because we felt it was pretty close, and the chances are that you would be going over in the south. And you would need to plan for that because, when does it ever work out in our favor? I think that you're going to get it.
Now, DBCP and TCP is the same media for removal, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have to have separate vessels for that, at least.
No. So the benefit of blending is significant. And you build pipes, and operation of pipes is, they operate themselves. If you have wellhead treatment, you have more manpower running around, you have the capital cost. And so the centralized plant concept was championed in the report, or found in the report as a viable way to limit the number of treatment processes, to try to manage the operation and maintenance, the number of people, man hours to run it, and some more pipe.
And also, so that you're addressing capacity, because if they shut that particular well down because of either MCL limits exceed, then that could potentially impact your water capacity, your maximum daily demand and treatment issues.
Yeah, more flexibility, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. Any other questions for Alex?
Good presentation.
Thank you, and I appreciate your patience in letting us get here when we finally got here. Thank you.
All right, well, thanks, Alex. All right, so this dovetails really good into our next presenter, which in this case is our AECOM presentation on well number 8. So go ahead. Okay, I guess if you don't, okay, Lana, you want to present?
Jeff Black is,
Sorry, this should be quick.
apologize, actually Jeff had a prior engagement that he needs to do for that. We've been, well, 16, as you know, we've been working on the media replacement for the 16 arsenic that has been discussed here by Alex. Very expensive, so this went to the process to make sure we optimize the selection of the media. And, currently, we are in the final stages of making the pH adjustment and the media replacement. I'll have Jeff kind of go through the recent steps and where we are in the schedule. Thanks, Amanda. And sorry for bumping you.
My daughter needs to get picked up from soccer at 8 o'clock.
I'm holding it against you.
Thank you. And asked me to just kind of identify the work that's been done to date and what needs to be finished up at well 16. So I've kind of broken it out into 3 components to really simplify it, and I'll go through those 3 really quickly. But the project goal was to basically bring well 16 online. The first step, or the first component, was to replace the media in 3 of the existing filter vessels out there. That media is selected to remove arsenic. It's an absorptive media, like Alec explained. That media was delivered and installed in the filters. So that step of the process has been completed. The second step is a pH adjustment. The reason that pH adjustment was included is it prolongs the life of the media and improves the performance. That involves installation of some chemical storage tanks that were put out there, some chemical feed pumps and tubing, some chemical injection equipment, and then Filtronics Corporation did the setup and programming. And they're going to complete that tomorrow and Wednesday. So that's the second component. The third would be backwash automation. And one of the things that has been discussed here is reducing costs, reducing manpower requirements. Currently, there are 17 valves out there that need to be manipulated manually to go through a backwash sequence. Those 17 valves have been retrofitted with electronic actuators, and then a PLC or programmatic logic controller has been installed, or is being installed tomorrow and Wednesday, that will automate the activation of those valves so that somebody doesn't have to go out there manually and turn the valves every time you want to backwash one of the vessels. I mentioned to replace the 17 existing valves and actuators, the PLC, and a new control panel, and then testing and training and startup are yet to be completed. Right now, Wednesday is scheduled to have the media supplier and the filter, or the vessel manufacturer, to be out there on Wednesday. They're going to train staff on the sequencing and procedures for backwashing the vessels. And then on Friday, the manufacturer of the valves will be out there to train staff on setting the limits to make sure that when they do go into backwash mode, that the correct flow rates are being applied to the vessels. One of the problems that was out there previously, when they would manually do it, they'd get too much flow either going through the vessel in forward flow or in backwash mode, and we were washing some of that valuable media out into the system. With this training and the new valves and facilities, that hopefully won't happen anymore. So those are the 3 components.
And the life of, just for folks familiar, we expect to get how many months, from this particular meeting?
You recall what that number was?
It's actually depending on the amount of water we're going to get and how long we're going to use. It's estimated to last from 1 to 2 years. We think it, the historical levels for that 16 years could be up to 2 years.
Basically, it will depend on how much water we need to pump. If one of our wells were to go down and that well has to operate 24/7 and supply the system, it could be as little as a year, given the volume. And it's all based on how many times a volume of water fills the tank, gets treated, and goes out. So we have, there's a limited life of how many times this water can go through the tank.
Basically, low water around through the
So when do we expect the road to come online?
It's all the work is estimated to be completed by this Friday, including the training is scheduled for Friday. Next week at CDPH, Monday, Cassie is scheduled to come in, and she's scheduled to help department. And she's scheduled to visit the site and look at the operations.
So after she signs off,
We need to file the operations plan, which is something that the CEPS needs to apply for approval.
File
With that, there's still some documentation that needs to be filed with them. There's an operations plan, what we're going to do, and that still needs to be approved in order for us to get going. It shouldn't be much longer than, like you said, from the beginning, around the end of the month, we should.
for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, a couple of weeks.
Okay.
And there are some warranty items that we're working on.
That should relieve the stress on the system once it goes online. Okay.
All right, any questions for Mr. Black? No? All right, thank you.
You got an hour to go pick up your daughter.
All right, we're on dinner. Thanks. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so this dovetails right into AECOM's presentation. Steve, you can just take it from there and talk about well 8 and how we're preparing, given the feasibility, how 14 is going to be equipped so that we can have blended treatment.
Sure. Glad to follow Kennedy Jenks' proposal or presentation, because that kind of gives everybody the overview of your system. So I'll get down briefly into the nuts and bolts for well 8. This is a system that we started looking at the beginning of 2012, analyzing the best treatment for TCP. TCP is an old ag chemical that was used alongside a lot of other things like DBCP and nematicides and so forth. And unfortunately, it stays in the groundwater a long, long time at low levels. So, along with the city, we studied looking for the best available water treatment technology. We had a test run, a column test run, which are small pilot tests to determine how much media we're going to use. And again, like we stated before, this is a carbon system. We're settled on activated carbon. The schedule kind of gives you a breakdown of where we started and where we're at right now. And then the costs. I think Nanda's got copies of the costs. So analysis of the water quality showed us that activated carbon is the best available technology for removing TCP from your groundwater. And since that time, we've designed an activated carbon treatment system on the well 8 property there next to Foster Farms field. That that system will now be 4 vessels, 80,000 pounds of carbon, designed to operate at 1,200 to 1,300 gallons per minute, and discharge the water back into the system right where it's at right now. At the same time, we added some things, and we also addressed some complaints from Foster Farms. During the design phase, one of the complaints was that at a startup of well 8, there's a flush of high manganese water that gets into their plant, and when it's hit with chlorine for treatment, it, like was stated, it comes out brown, and that doesn't look good for the folks at the plant. So we addressed that because it's a very short-term issue right at startup. We addressed that with automatic valves that will shunt the water for the first, and that's settable right now. I think we're set at 15 minutes. Through the basin there near well 8. And then from the basin, that water will be pumped into the sewer. And that we anticipate, based on the well 8 operation, that's going to be once a week. That'll have to occur Sunday when it's down, and it starts up early Sunday morning for treatment. Then it'll flush the waste for 15 minutes, and then the valves will automatically turn and provide that water to the distribution system. So that was one of the design changes that had to be made. We also, because the nitrate at the well is right at half of the MCL, which is not a problem for drinking, one of the issues that has come up with carbon treatment and CDPH has now mandated that these kind of activities occur. If you're at half of the MCL or higher with nitrate, there is a chance, however slight, that at startup, if the system's been idle for a number of hours to days, at startup you may see a flush of high nitrate water come off of the carbon. So to combat that, we've installed a nitrate analyzer. And if the nitrate it's an online nitrate analyzer, if the nitrate is too high after startup, the water will be flushed to waste until the nitrate level comes down, and then the valves will close and the water will be delivered to the system. At this point, I don't expect that to be a problem because, like it was said before, well 8 is right at half. The CDPH hasn't seen this kind of issue until the nitrate gets a little closer to 3/4 of the MCL. But it's a precaution they want on there because we don't want high nitrate water into your water supply. So that's an automatic system element. Finally, two things. We have redesigned the instrumentation and controls at the wellhead site. The old control system was a Tesco system, and that Tesco is a proprietary system, meaning that only Tesco can work on it. So if you want repairs done, you can only get those done. Tesco is the only one that can do it. So what was decided, what we did was redesign the instrumentation controls with essentially an open system, so any system integrator can now come in and help work on your system. That allows you flexibility when you're going out for service. If there's a problem with the integration system, any of a number of good integrators are available. You won't have to rely solely on Tesco. And then finally, right now, we're finishing up down, as you're probably aware, the design is complete, it's out to bid. And I think the bids are due September 10th, 14th, 17th, somewhere early mid-September. So the design is out for bid right now. The bids will be coming in. We're going to be putting an addendum together to add elements to our current design that will allow for an easy transition if well 14, if the city decides to bring water from well 14 to the well 8 site to treat it. Now, this is not a blending issue because, as it was stated accurately, you can't blend the TCP out at the concentrations you're talking about. But it allows you to basically centralize your treatment, so you only got one area where your folks have to come to monitor system operations. You only have to handle a certain number of, all the valving is all in one place. Your pressure systems flows, it all comes out of the one PLC to your SCADA system. So it provides your operators a lot more efficiency when they deal with their treatment system. And it also alleviates the need to provide a system at well 14, and I'm not sure if there's land there for it.
Actually, that's the one Mr. Steinberg mentioned about DVCP and TCP.
Yeah, which will, yeah.
So that is.
So it's the same medium with municipality,
Right.
which is good.
So we've gone to an expandable, the system will be expandable. Right now we're looking at the instrumentation and controls to make sure that we can add all the new inputs, flow, pressure, and so forth. And that addendum will be coming out. The contractors will just add it to their package. It should not affect their costs significantly, but they need to know about it so that they bid the construction correctly. So that's basically where we're at. Like I said, I'll be brief. There is room on the site right now for the extra vessels, and we've upsized the piping and added elements to the electrical controls. So there were two cost estimates that went around. One is the capital cost for constructing our current, basically, engineer's estimate of probable cost for the system construction at well 8, and that does not include well 14 vessels. It's just the well 8 system. But the advantage for well 14 is if you bring it to the well 8 site, you don't have to reconstruct your Instrumentation and controls, you won't have to add any new system for that. The piping's essentially already in place. 14, I'm sorry if I misspoke, 14. So it will present a cost savings if and when you decide to treat the water from well 14 by essentially centralizing the treatment. The other piece of paper is our operation and maintenance cost estimate, annual cost estimate, and a 10, 20, and 30-year service life O&M cost, present worth. That has a lot to do with the cost of the media, because the main issue with the carbon is that you have to buy fresh media, or you have to buy media every time it becomes exhausted. You'll be replacing it with fresh media, and that media has a cost element. Right now we're looking at, we have 80,000 pounds of carbon. The current carbon, based on the testing, initial testing, should last about a year and a third or a year and a quarter, about 430-ish days, but that is only an estimate. We'll have a better idea once we start operating. Each vessel has sample ports on the side of the vessel, so you can track the move of the contaminant through the carbon media as it goes and get a real good idea of how much carbon you're using on a daily basis, basically per million gallons treated, however you want to measure it. There are a couple other items that I can touch on. One is this system, and the bid package calls for just buying the first load of carbon, 80,000 pounds of carbon. After that, once you have a good idea of where you are at as far as carbon usage, then we believe the city could go out and get competitive bids just for the carbon, because these vessels are universal. Any kind of activated carbon of the proper mesh size will go in these vessels. You are not tied into any one manufacturer of carbon or any one type of carbon. We picked, based on the research and our testing, the best carbon type that we felt would work for the city, but you will have the option after a year to go out and bid for a carbon supplier to provide carbon for 3 years or 5 years or whatever life you want. At that point, the carbon vendors don't have to bid the equipment; they're just bidding the carbon. And CEPH has started to see the advantage of going to reactivated carbon. One of the issues that, one of the things that they didn't like in the past was reactivated carbon, how it would be controlled once it leaves your facility and comes back to you, because as a water purveyor you have to have NSF certified carbon coming to your facility. Your carbon, not anybody else's carbon. They don't want to blend. It's National Sanitation Foundation. It's how the cities identify drinking clean stuff for drinking water. Like the lining in the carbon vessel has to be NSF certified to paint, so you know it's not going to leach out contaminants. But there are new facilities. Carbon companies have developed facilities in California to do reactivated carbon, so it's much easier to track your carbon and get your carbon back after it's been reactivated. And that could cut down significantly on the cost. And companies are looking to find a place to use reactivated carbon that may be even willing to offer you some kind of performance guarantee. Although I can't say that for sure. I don't work for a carbon company. So that's something you'd have to fight it out with them. But reactivated carbon, it could go for this carbon is running about right now $2.24 a pound. You could get reactivated carbon, this carbon coming back to you after you've used it reactivated at $1.30 a pound, $1.20 a pound, depending. It may not be quite as efficient, but from a dollar cost or a price per 1,000 gallons treated, it may be much more efficient. And that's something that can be looked at that point. So that's basically it. Hopefully I covered on to everything you wanted me to cover. Is there any specifics? Okay, just questions. Yeah, please.
Now you say, who's going out for bids on this? Now, you're talking about carrying out the equipment that's in there now, correct?
We would, no, the pump that's there.
No, the pumps and all.
The pump's going to stay.
Right.
Right now, I'm sure most of you are familiar, the pipe comes out of the building.
Yeah.
There's a flow meter on the inside, outside. There's well, maybe the flow meter's on the outside. We're gonna, right as that elbows down and goes 45 into the ground, we're gonna take that off from there, turn it 90, bring it to the treatment vessels, and then turn it back and then put it right back where it's at.
But the you're talking about the treatment vessels, what's in there is what you're going out for bid on.
That's correct, yes. Yeah.
And this company that has it is the only one that has this equipment, correct?
The carbon vessels themselves?
Well, this equipment that's in there now, that's gonna be replaced, am I correct?
Oh, it's the carbon, just the like the granular, basically the charcoal, small, it's like grains of sand size carbon. That media gets replaced.
Well, that's what I don't understand, because you're talking
Okay.
about some of the equipment that
The
only this
controls.
company could work on.
Oh, that's the instrumentation and controls, that's the sense,
Well, that's what you're going
Right.
out for bid on and all, correct?
that's part of the design, right, part of the
Because
design.
what my question is whoever gets the bid and they're gonna install it, that we get all the manuals and stuff
Right,
to be able to work on it and also go out and buy the parts where
Right.
they're needed.
right.
That's what I'm looking at.
That's correct. So, for instance, right now you have Tesco, which is not only a manufacturer of the components, the electrical boxes and all that, they also do the service. And their stuff is proprietary. They won't let anybody work on their stuff or avoids the warranty, and nobody wants to work on it because you have to pay for the,
Now, this is what's
Right.
installed now, right?
what's installed now, right,
Yeah, okay.
exactly.
That's what I'm trying to.
Sorry, Humberto, go ahead.
There's a catch to this. Even though we're going out to get bids, if they turn out to be the lowest bidder, we may end up with them.
Well,
But
Yeah,
isn't
but I think-
isn't there an exception
Are the specs
to that?
We
We're not
try to make sure that we're
Right.
open, that we have something that is just off the shelf, that's the
Right.
plan.
it's out, yeah, we're specifying Allen Bradley, that's or equal,
That's right.
or equal, yeah.
So
We-
that's right.
Right, because Allen Bradley is they just manufacture the equipment, they don't handle anything else. So you could get Square D or
Right.
something like that, but our specs are based on Allen Bradley. We're familiar with Allen Bradley and they make good stuff. And it's open, anybody can work on it.
Well, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
I've been in supply for, God, 40-some years, but.
Right. So you're familiar with.
But I want to be
Right.
able, excuse me, that our city workers.
Right.
Be able to get in there and be able to get these parts that are available without going back to whoever.
Correct, yeah, you should be able to buy all this stuff off the shelf pretty
Yeah.
much.
It's still specialized work, but we can use anyone that's
Right.
familiar. Unlike today, where we only have one
Locked in
supplier,
on this.
Yeah.
one technician,
Tesco,
one
yeah.
part, one.
Not that Tesco's a bad outfit, but if they are the only one that can work on your stuff, it tends to limit your options. So we went ahead and designed it so it's going to be open.
Good.
Excuse me. And that'll, when you're integrators, when you want to do SCADA integration, especially as you expand, you do more wells, you'll want to be able to have integrators that can work with your stuff and hire the best integrator at the lowest price, essentially, not be locked in. So,
We have a pre-bid meeting tomorrow, so we're inviting the contractors.
right, so your general contractors will be coming tomorrow to have a look at the site and ask questions if they have any questions about the bid package. And they probably will have a lot of questions, they usually do. And a lot of them are pretty smart questions, so we'll take those seriously. And if an addendum needs to be done to the bid, to package, we'll submit the addendum out. And everybody looks at it, because it's not a mandatory meeting, but if we do make a change, everybody needs to see it, anybody who's interested in bidding it. So we get as many good bids as we possibly can. And then once the bids are in, then the city will have to award the contract. They'll have to negotiate with the contractor, award the contract, issue the notice to proceed, and at that point, the contractor can start building the vessels, and that's really the longest lead item. It's like a 16-week lead for the vessels themselves, which I show on the schedule. So that needs to be done. They need to start ordering these immediately and get the vessels in fabrication, because they don't start making them until they get a signed contract. So that will really hold it up, as long, assuming that could be the holdup, but I anticipate that we should manage that as long as the contractor provides a good bid.
So your revised schedule here,
Yeah, this is a little bit out of date, because we didn't get the bid package out on the 29th of July. I think it went out the first or second week of August. So this will probably push the schedule push it 2 weeks out from here. So instead of an April finish, we'll finish in May next year.
because the previous one took us to December, so now it's taking us to early May.
That's, construction, right. You have the construction, of course. Once the package goes out for bid and the bids are returned, and I think, I had the bidding shoved out too far, all the way to the end of September, but that's not correct. So maybe the schedule is good. Maybe we will finish up in April then, construction, assuming that we don't get any bad weather or any other delays. The weather being the main culprit, but last year
If there are no major addendums, this bid advertisement here could be
yeah, I think we have a 2-month, but it's not correct. I think we're bidding it out more than a month.
I think the bid's going to open on the 9th, September 9th.
At the 9th, okay, so we'll be ahead of schedule then. This estimated bid opening the end of September, so.
So basically, you're looking at regulating well 14 and 8 to a single point.
Correct.
Now, we have a problem well number 9, which doesn't cause any problem for us. It's only a couple of blocks down. You think it's probably worthwhile to get it out to the same place, or?
Talking about another well besides 14?
Yeah, number 8, number 9 right now.
I couldn't speak to that.
I don't know what's gonna happen if we're looking, it's almost like the centralized, they all have TCP,
Right.
That doesn't have this issue now, but the way Livingston has been going,
It's in the not centralized plan.
to take it over there at the same time?
Well, one thing to keep in mind is and I know Kennedy Jenks looked at this when they looked at the bringing well 14, because they're looking at you sort of holistically, and I'm looking at you sort of
Right.
narrow focus. But they had to look at the fact that when you take water from one point in your system and you stop pushing it into that system, that creates a low pressure zone potentially, because I've moved that injection point to my system. Plus, the pipe that's there may not be big enough to handle 3 wells of water all into one injection system. So those are some things that would have to be looked at. Again, that's sort of a holistic approach. And I couldn't really say much past that.
It is in one of the alternates.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Right.
Yeah, I saw that in here to take it over there. And I was thinking, because we have plenty of land there.
That is what we did is more immediate because of the similar nature of treatment with the UCP. Right now, we incorporated into the design change without impacting any of the construction costs. We just changed the alignment and size of the discharge pipe and some minor changes.
Right.
That way, the city were ready to put the pipeline from 14. We didn't have to go back and make any major changes that are just being put in.
I got you.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure you could just plug 14 right in, build your system, plug it right in and go. You won't have to spend a lot of time re-engineering it.
Okay.
And if anybody has any questions later, Nanda sure knows how to get a hold of me.
I got a question. Why did the design take so long for this period, like 220 days?
There was some elements in that design that added to the time. We had let's see, once we had decided that the nitrate, we got nitrate data, so we had to determine what we were going to do with the nitrates, and that meant putting the automatic valves on. So we were redesigning at that point. We redesigned the instrumentation and controls. That took several months, not several months, but a couple of months. Once the city asked us to redesign that, so that added time. When Foster Farm said, hey, we've got a problem with your first 15 minutes of water, that was news to us because we'd sat with them in the meetings. So we needed to look at, go back to our design. So there was a lot of iterations in that process. It stretched us out, unfortunately. And it's just, it's unfortunate, but those kind of things come up. Sometimes people realize, they think to themselves, hey, you know what, you guys need to address this. And so then we got to kind of go back to the drawing board a little bit. And then obviously the city wants to look at it, and they're very fast with their reviews, but everybody needs to look at it from a quality control standpoint.
Those included these two locations we had the same rates. Conditions that were considered.
There's time in there for the building department to have a look at it to make sure that it meets code from your building department side. And again, they were fast. Having to deal with the city of Fresno, you guys are fantastic, but still, it all adds up, unfortunately.
And parallel to that, the property documentation, the state of the we have completed the property state of the so the document that needs to transfer the property.
If we're moving ahead with fixing our wells, it's like 2.5 years just to do one well.
No, actually, that'll take care of 2 wells.
And we do it,
You should look into it.
There will be an element of design for 14, though. You'll have to design your pipeline over and the
Well, yeah, like you can do that currently too,
Some additional design.
Yeah, but there's some additional design, but
well, yeah, things like the instrumentation and controls already handled. That saves a lot of time. I mean, that's a significant factor
the
in
point of it,
making the electrical work for you.
the point of it is if you're gonna do the work on A, if you know you have to do it with 14, you might as well send it down now at least.
And that's what we've done. So that'll save a lot of time.
Yeah, I mean, you can, what I was trying to explain today was you could potentially have 2 wells done at the same time. That's what I was trying. You actually have 2 wells done at the same time.
And see if you can, the treatment process itself, what you went through, what the process you went through for some of the
At the beginning.
testing and
Right. So a lot of the elements at the beginning are settled now. One of the problems and so there's essentially 6 months at the beginning for the research into your treatment technology and the testing of the carbon. The problem with TCP, like the gentleman from Kennedy Jenks stated, is an emerging contaminant. There isn't an MCL for it. There's very little research on treatment. So we spent time looking at what was available treatment to make sure that you had a system that was going to work for you to get that treatment level. Because one thing he didn't say, right now you're running at about 400 parts per trillion in the water. The state has a preliminary health goal, which is where that's their starting point for setting an MCL. Now, it doesn't mean that's where they're going to leave it. But their starting point is 0.7 parts per trillion. That's what the state scientists say is the 1 in a million cancer risk. So currently you can't detect that in a laboratory, so it's just a theoretical number, but you can detect 5 parts per billion, or 5 parts per trillion, excuse me. So the state may start out at a MCL of close to that level at the detection limit. to get to that level, we needed to find a treatment technology that was going to get you there consistently. And it turns out activated carbon is pretty much the only one that will do that cost effectively. But it did take some time to do that research, and then the pilot test is basically a 1.5 or 2 month process. It takes time for them to run the tests, and then have to wait for the data to come back, and then they have to write the report. So we wanted to see that come back too. But all that's out the door, so if we have any more systems now for TCP treatment, all that initial work has been done, you know you're going to go right to carbon. You'll have a really good grip on what kind of carbon you like, and we can basically eliminate that first half of the design, the preliminary design element, which is a significant. It's similar to a project we're doing in Merced now, where they didn't even go for a design they have PCE in one of their wells. Everybody knows, let me put it this way, the best available technology generally for wellhead treatment for PCE, which is a solvent, is carbon. So they said, okay, we don't need the preliminary design report, we don't need the study, let's just start designing the treatment system, and that's what we've done.
Yeah.
And you'll be in that situation on the remaining wells. So hopefully this initial one will help save you time down the road.
And that's exactly what I was pointing out. It says, well, cookie cut to the rest, you know.
It makes it a lot easier, for sure, yeah.
And how does well 17 look from the time of beginning to end? Design, finish?
It's already designed.
Well, I mean, to get it out and running.
It's manganese treatment, we can talk about manganese treatment compared to TCP.
Yeah.
It's less complicated.
Right.
It will be short duration, but because of the limits and some of the changes in this project that happened, and the stakeholders that were involved, we also ran the design, every stage of the design through fosterfarms.com for their engineers to look at it, make sure that they are happy. Because we're using their facilities and some of the pumping, basin usage there, and the property conditions. So we, apart from really the stakeholders, we submitted the plans and make sure there's a legal so all of that will not be site is limited and the type of treatment.
You don't got an estimate?
To do well 17 design how long has the well been sitting there?
That must be about 4 years now.
So you'll want to redevelop it, of course, because you're going to have scale on the well. That won't take too long. So then it's.
Did we pump it at least a few weeks ago? A year ago?
No.
No, we did. You weren't here.
But only for sampling, though. That's not the same
That's
thing.
not.
Okay, well then, how could you, it has scaling, how could you test?
Oh, you'll just redevelop it. You'll get a well drilling company out there to scrub the inside and pump it out. You'll flush it.
No, the reason I was asking is,
Sample makes a little,
Yeah, but you.
half-inch hose.
Yeah, but that's what I was questioning, is that, that's what I was thinking, because they had a diesel engine on there with a well on it, they're pumping a lot of water out of it.
That was a while back, that wasn't,
No, it was just recently, not within the last couple of years, yes.
oh, a couple of
Still
years.
low.
No, prior to you.
Oh, okay, prior to the.
Yeah, prior to you,
Yeah.
because they had to put a diesel pump there,
Yeah,
and they had rented the pumps.
and
That's why, when you said,
You'll definitely want to redevelop the.
oh, no, I'm not talking about.
Oh.
It's about 4 years ago, I read the report.
About 4 years.
So it'll have to be redone, like you said, it'll have to be
Right.
redeveloped.
It could be 4 years, but that's okay.
And that's not,
That was for.
that's a big project, we have to run this through the water. That's a different story.
We have contacted them.
Okay, if you wanted a rough estimate of how much it would cost, According to the Kennedy Jenks report, their estimated cost is $1.7 million.
I want to know the time.
The time?
Duration.
Yeah.
Design.
Probably, but I, not, the developer, they prepared the section. So I contacted the engineer to see if we can get it out of CAD so that they can start rather than sort of scratch it. So they have looked at, it's been several years. That engineer does not contact them, he was directly contacted by the developer, that no one exists. So this engineer that we contacted is still trying to locate those categories to see if they can be provided, or they can submit a proposal for the plans to be done.
Have to be going over completely, because the biggest mistake we make, we go with the same plans and we find something that's overlooked.
That's right. We do need to do the redesign. Make sure that, we like the design.
Need improvements.
Exactly. We need to, like for Bill 16, several improvements are identified, automated, so we want to make sure that this current design will incorporate all the current standards and operational requirements. So, but that can be done.
The reason for the questions is that this is very important, given the fact that, we have quite a few developers who are knocking on the door, and so we need to try to get number 17 on board as soon as possible for all development and even current development, even current capacity, so that we have some flexibility and have some safety, some cushion in there. And so, very good questions, David, on well 17.
Because we can't start building without more water.
Yeah, we need to do that.
So that,
It's not an exact, I mean, it's hard to have an exact science, but you don't want to take it to to the limit. You want to make sure you have, like I said, some cushion in there, some safety factors, and so that's why it's important to, we've already identified that 17 needs to be developed as soon as possible, and that doesn't mean, absolutely no, we can't let anybody build today, but if somebody comes today and says, well, I want to build 100 homes, well, we don't have a water reliability, we can't give them an assurance until we get number 17 on board.
Yeah, we can't wait 2
And we can't wait two
Yeah,
years. Yeah, no, absolutely.
I from the get-go, the goal would be to compress that schedule. And a lot of the elements that we're looking at here will not exist on the project. And there is a high importance. Yeah, I'm sure that it will be much shorter.
Well, just as an example, from beginning to end, from the project you're working on, set, 6 months,
Yeah, to get to the design, it's going to squeeze it down quite a bit, right?
that's the thing. Once it goes, amazing what money can do.
Well,
You can get it short,
yeah.
you can get it done in
It's-
no time.
Yeah.
Some of the funding established, go, select all of them, and then we can also power
Something else to consider in the timeline too is at the beginning, you've got the contract, you've got to write your RFP, you've got to put it out for a consultant to bid it. Consultant's got to prepare the bid, and then you've got to review the bid, and then you've got to write a contract, and then you've got city council to approve the contract. So there is 2 or 3 months of time just to get somebody on board for that at the beginning. So, and that's an element that has to be considered too. But if you just say, I want them ready to do 17, you can't go right out and start designing it. There's a lot of elements at the beginning. And if you have iron and manganese problems
Chase, yes.
what's the concentration, you're not really sure because you haven't run the well, so you'll want to start testing it. So there are a few things we can do, ahead of time to start to sort of get that process rolling, and those are some elements. I'm certainly happy to talk about it, but
This, on this well data, it says the only thing that looked like it showed up was manganese, correct?
And there's a limit of how many years can pass where the data is useful. And the data for that well was in 4 years, 5 years ago.
yeah, Kenny Jenks must have looked at it.
There's a limit of how much EPH will allow you to use the data.
Right.
It may be that by next year, they'll have to retest the whole thing again, which means they'll have to be developed again and then take samples.
Yeah,
Tell them about the national sampling you have to do, you look it up.
Oh, that was the
did you just
UCMR 3.
big 3-year?
Yeah.
5 years.
And basically, we were able to get the same AOP phone calls, and there were allowances there to give you time frame that extended the time for testing. Which made it a little easier.
That's quite an undertaking.
It is.
Yeah.
It's not inexpensive, as you
No.
will find out. We're looking at $27,000-$30,000. In this case, like I said, well, 17, if they don't allow us to use the data that's taken 3 years ago, 4 years ago,
Right.
whatever it was, then we'll have to, like you said, develop the well again.
Right.
Let it run for a while so that we can get representative samples and then sample it again. Again, we're talking about setting it out, finding a place to put all that water. There's going to be a lot of water. There's not a good place anyway. Rent piping. It's just a bigger project. And then, of course, sampling. Hopefully, the numbers are not too far off from where they were 3 years ago. And that's the thing with groundwater. You don't want to do anything.
Yeah, and the UCMR is what the EPA uses to see what the constituents are across the nation, so that when they put their programs together, the analysis, what they need to look for, what trends are.
That's also what they use to set the limits. If they see something climbing. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of things that have to be reviewed before any of this looks like that.
All right,
Yeah,
any other questions for Steve?
I think I'm just going to, the well 17 is to replace well 10? No?
18.
8?
A new well.
A new well.
Named well 18.
Okay, a new well, okay. Yeah, because I'm just looking back at an old rate study from back for 2008, and in it was pointing out the necessity of replacing a well years ago. So it's like we're now there's things that we've known about years ago and that haven't gotten done, and now we're trying to hurry up and play catch up. And the stuff, it's not going to come easy, and it's not going to come cheap.
Okay, any other questions for Steve? All right. Well, now the last item on here is very important as well, and so we wanted to kind of talk to you about these the very items that needs to get done in the short term, and then of course, when we say short term, we're talking the next 5 years. So we have a list of items that we want to go over and mention to the stakeholders. And going into this, basically, staff sat down many times along with some of the engineering folks to, okay, what can we incorporate in the first 5 years that we absolutely need? Because as you know, in the first 5 years, we have to, one, get out of the deficit that we currently have, and number two, we need to build up enough reserves so that those agencies that are out there we are applying for grants will look at us, because as you know, some of these places don't, unless you are out of the red and have a little bit of buildup, they won't give you any grant funding.
Right.
So for the first 5 years, again, what we're trying to do is get out of the red, build up a little bit of reserve, and then address some of the things that absolutely need to get addressed. It's not until the next 5 years after that that you start addressing then the next layer of areas that you need to address. And then in the next 5 years, so you're doing some short, mid, and long-term planning, okay? And everything is going to build up over time. So when we get to the first 5, then we're going to position ourselves to bring in quite a bit of outside money to help us, so it's not a complete burden on the local residents. And then you should be in a better place to address the next 5 years of items, and then position you to address the long term, depending on what direction the city wants to go. And so that's the plan. And let's see, we can start going over the. Do you want to go over the list, Nanda, or do you want? Or do you go over the list? We have the list. Or you want to go over the list? Pass them out.
Well, many of the projects are the same projects that we discussed earlier.
We'll just address the water today.
And many of these projects are some of the projects that Alex mentioned.
Thank you.
You can give it to me, good ball, I don't. You don't,
Here.
oh,
good.
it's all right here.
The top project that we just covered is the well number 8. I mentioned it's going through the bidding process, and fairly soon it will be in construction. It's the total, or majority of the costs, excluding the design costs that have been paid out, are budgeted in the current year.
The actual cost of that project was
1.88.
Just a little under 1.9. So just to be fair, because the cost for design was already paid.
That's right.
So, and that project is already underway. Well 13. Well 13 is the well that has the arsenic issue. And this is just a very rough estimate of the cost based on well 16. We may explore other things as far as treatment, but that's a rough estimate. And again, we know based on the sampling that we've done, the quarterly sampling that we've been required to do from the California Department of Public Health, that we are not likely to be clear of that arsenic violation. So it won't be long before the state will be requiring the city to do something as retreatment or abandon the well, which is not an option for us at this point. Well 17. Again, here's another estimate, and this is just based on rough engineer's estimates and on what we have currently with the city.
Yeah, this is a project on some Valley Estates that was developed and not developed 4 years ago.
Let me chime in on that. We applied to to Housing and Community Development Department. We applied for 1.7, I think it was 1.7 $1 million. We've got our fingers crossed. We hope we get this. This would be 100% grant. If we get this, of course, that's going to help in addressing well number 17. We're going ahead with well number 17 regardless. The way we're going to pay for 17 is that we're going to borrow from our TCP funds and pay it back with, what's the interest rate?
We're looking at current market rates, it will be 2 to 3%, somewhere between.
Okay, and program that out over several years. But again, with development and with and grant funding that we can get, we can pay that back sooner rather than later. But there is no option for us. We've got to move forward on that, on well 17 in order to have that capacity, and then, of course, the treatment process. So, go ahead.
Basically, and I have to build a little bit on what Jose just said. This 5-year capital improvement plan, it's really addressing the things for which there weren't too many other options that the city needs to move ahead.
Yeah, because we didn't want to, we did not want to overly burden the residents in the first 5 years, and so otherwise, you know, we don't even know what the rates would look like. But we wanted to go with what absolutely needed to get done, and now these numbers, if stakeholders agree and so forth, the council agrees, then we can then release these to the rate consultant who will then work on them and then give us a dollar amount.
One of the things is, I know that we need to do, you know, I think nobody here can deny we need to do this, is when we rate, before, we need to hear the rate consultant, but also to ask, look, if we go out and get loans, say, I know we're gonna borrow from ourselves, it's 2%, how many years we're gonna pay, we need to have that figured into the rate structure, you know?
Yes.
Now, because if you're gonna try to pay for this in the first 5 years.
No, we're not.
You can't.
That's why the rate consultant, we have already chatted a little bit with them, and on the TCP settlement money, you know, they're telling us at least, you know, take it out 20 years. But our goal is to pay that back sooner rather than later, because the benefit areas of these people that are going to come in to build have to pay their share.
Yeah, one thing is, because we're using some of this TCB money, well 17 I can understand, it's a complete well, but how much is the money like on well 13? How much is the actual cost of that capital is really TCP? Was it all like TCP cost or?
No, on well number 13, the only MCL limit that we have right now to address there is arsenic, which went over by, it was about 10.6 right now. Yeah. So basically, right now, that's what we have to do, and then within the next 5 to 10 years, we have to address TCP there as well, because.
Well, that's what I think I've said this over the years, over the time, that if we anticipate TCP, why aren't we pre-planning for that? I mean, we're going to spend $1.8 million to remove arsenic. I mean, the biggest part is, I mean, why aren't we planning for TCP now? Because say that we spend $1.8 million based on our current cost of well 8 foster farms. Yeah, which is almost the same amount of cost as for TCP removal almost, you know? So why aren't we, I mean.
Well, we are, except that you gotta remember that the treatment process for arsenic versus manganese versus TCP, you know, there's different. So right now what we're trying to do is we're trying to do everything that we can to be able to use the flows from 13, because without it, we would be in dire straits, and so the state understands that, and if we can bring in 17 on board, then that gives us relief, and then we can address not only the arsenic issue on 13, but also the TCP, because that's
what I'm saying is, I mean, the way you're looking at it, shouldn't we be looking at a arsenic / TCP, not the nickel? What are the parameters? We need to be doing back, because
I know where you're,
that's how I understand it.
yeah, I know where
You
you,
guys are the experts.
yeah, I know where you're coming from, but,
Basically, to remove arsenic is basically one particular type of medium, and then to remove TCP is another type of medium. But you should, once you have the plumbing in, all you do is put a second vessel in. So most of your piping can be used just adding a vessel, so you should be planning for that now. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, because if we didn't come back and redo it, it's gonna cost us a lot more than to say, okay, you know what? We know we're gonna end up doing TCP, so the plumbing should have been designed to do that now.
That's a very good point. It's sort of what you're getting from what I'm understanding is what you would like to see is what's happening now with well 8. In well 8, the manifold is being moved to accept well 14. What you're saying now with well 13,
Yeah, but it should have
to
been
think
done
about
now.
that. Well, now that I understand, when we get to the design, we can
That's what
talk
I'm
to the
saying.
design engineers
So
to add
putting 1.8
the expansion capability.
1.8 million now, and then adding another, you know
So
what I'm saying?
basically, add the expansion capability.
Yeah.
Basically, that's because we can save a lot of money by doing that now. And it's not gonna add a whole lot more cost to it.
And that will
And
be
then
our
also,
design engineers who can.
as because we were doing TCP removal,
Yeah, that makes
we
sense.
have the funds available right now for it.
Design engineers to look at,
yeah,
leaving it open for expansion.
yeah,
That's what I'm trying to say.
yeah, it makes sense, it makes sense.
Before we send this off, we need to know, we need to get, because well 13, come on, like we said.
Yeah, so
TCP is gonna be
basically,
5 years.
yeah, so
So we
basically,
need to look at that right now before we send it to rates.
yeah. Oh, that's great, I mean, that's why we have these.
That's going to be the interesting part, because in this case, to leaving it open for that expansion of treatment,
I'm not trying to slow this down, we need to move
Oh,
forward.
no, no, you're right, I mean, the bottom line is, okay, now,
Because we.
Adding that in.
We do have, if I look at it, we do have TCP on well 13, correct?
well, we basically have TCP in all the wells,
We have TCP on well 13.
yes.
So we should be designing to remove TCP now. And then add the vessel for arsenic to it.
yeah, we were just talking about it, and basically, they can do a sort of a concept design, which preliminary design, to give us an idea of what that would entail, and that could give us an idea of how much more this would cost.
Because if you're gonna do it.
It's still not a hard number, but it gives us an idea.
No, you know you're gonna have 3 kids, why buy 2 bedroom home now? You know, I mean, it's just the way of looking at it, okay?
Valid,
That's a good point.
Very valid.
Funding prioritization, when do you want to spend that?
Yeah, and we need to know that, and then also, before we send this, I mean, you guys can kind of add this in, you don't have to come to us, it has to go to council before it goes to,
Yeah,
you know, is to update that number and say, if we're gonna include that modification for TCP, what is that actually cost? Let's just do it now, instead of having to come back to it.
sounds good.
Okay.
But it's,
It makes sense, it makes sense.
On your, you said some of these rates. What does that mean? Is that be paid by the ratepayer or a rate increases or?
Okay, so as you know, all of this that we're doing, that we've been doing, is so that we can position ourselves to make sure that we're going in the right direction and we address everything, and so that we address we all know that we have to increase the rates. Okay, so this list here is what we're saying is kind of the minimum. I mean, maybe we could shave off another little thing in there, but this is what we really would like to have, because otherwise it's going to be a little bit more difficult down the road. So if they take this, and she does her calculations, Mrs. Hansford does her calculation, she's going to spit out a number, and that number is what she's going to say the rates are going to go to, and these are the 5-year rates, because the rates can only be extended out for 5 years. After the 5-year mark, you have to go through another Prop 218 hearing process in order to set the next 5 years for other rates. So in the first 5 years, again, we have about, what is it, about $1 million in the red right now? Okay, in water, I'm talking just water right now. $1 million in water, And then you want to have a little bit of a cushion, you know, some type of reserve. Why? Because a lot of these places ask you for at least a 1.5, you know, reserve in order for them to release any grant funding. Okay, and then the most critical needs in your system, and these are some of the most critical needs are in your system. So if you take that I just gave you, plus that, she gets those, crunches the numbers, and she'll say, the water fund, or the water rates need to be X. I don't know, say $15, I don't know. I'm just throwing the number out, okay? And so that's what the recommendation is, that we raise the rates to that threshold. And the same thing has to happen on the sewer side. But on the sewer side, it's not as complicated as the water. The water is number one right now.
Okay. Okay, so this money right here, you earlier said not throwing money, bad money against, good money against bad money, that's it. If any of the proposals that Mr. Kennedy, Kennedy are accepted, is this gonna be still valid? I mean, we're gonna have to say, they say, sometimes the well, sometimes the
Keep in mind that this is only for the first 5 years. What you're trying to do, what we're addressing right now is only for the first 5 years. And then what was covered in here covers the next 5 and the next 5.
And if you remember, he showed a slide where he showed the 5 years. Most of what he covered in that 5 year, a lot of the things are here. So everything has been working in tandem.
I'm thinking about what he just said earlier, throwing every good money against.
Yeah, no, but the reason I said that, let me tell you why I said that. A federal or state agency, or even a philanthropic agency, you know, if they know that you don't got your house in order and you're in the negative, why am I going to give you money?
Yeah, they don't want to.
They're not gonna,
We know
You
we have to
can't
do
pay your bills. Why would I give you money that I know you can't pay me back?
So I was thinking that this thing's gonna be necessary to go with those other sides.
yes, yeah, if we do this, then we can show up and say that we need money. And they're gonna say, you got your place in order, you're starting to have a positive cash flow? Okay, then we can go up. Because see, technically, we're losing money right now because we can't go to them to ask them, because we know they're not gonna give us it, regardless of how dire we are. You know, unless there's a billionaire out there that want to give us money.
Money to make money.
Okay, would it be a good way of saying this is like, this is the stuff that we got to do if we got to do it all by ourselves. And the Kennedy Jenks report with the centralized treatment is, these are the things that we can do if we can get money from elsewhere. Like the centralized treatment thing and the big projects, the big multi-million-dollar projects.
A good way to put it, the city still has to do a lot of those things at some point in the future. But yeah, that would be, I think, a good way to phrase it. And another way to put it, this with the money, what Jose mentioned earlier, is.
So, Jose, when do we meet again?
We are, I'm looking at my calendar now.
Because I don't know how long it's going to take her to crack the numbers, it shouldn't be very long.
No, the cranking of the numbers, we should be able to come up with a reasonable engineering estimate for the TC treatment on that one. So let's just think out loud here. If that number comes out to be a huge number, I don't anticipate that, but let's say it's a huge number, then it's up to you, the council, then to decide whether that's something that you want to hold off for the next 5 years, or you want to address in the first 5. Why? Because that is directly going to impact how much the rates will go up. Okay? Anyways.
Well, that's the decision.
Yeah. No, I'm that's why we're here like this. So.
And one thing also to keep in mind, once the EPA establishes the TCP number, chances are you're going to have a lot of companies jumping in, coming up with treatment processes and systems. So you don't want to be too locked into one. It's okay to design for the plumbing, but that would probably be the extent of it. Because any more than that, hopefully there's all kinds of other companies that.
Other than half of media that we use, companies don't,
Yeah.
no matter what, you have to take that water through something, take it out.
No, you got a very point. So we are on it. We will jump on the numbers and we'll get back. So I will let you know on the date. It should be really quick, probably in the next,
So maybe meet in 2 weeks?
2 weeks. Is that okay with you?
Fine.
All right.
That
2
gives,
weeks.
that gives a little cushion.
Yeah, that gives a little cushion in case there's a little bump and next. By the way, this is not on the agenda, but next Monday and Wednesday, we have, no problem, we'll get you guys pizza, but we have the American Institute of Architects folks, remember?
Yeah.
It's vital that you guys participate. I'll call you individually, but definitely from 6 to 8 on Monday and 6 to 8 on Wednesday next week, here in this chamber. And invite whoever you want. We'll be raffling some bracelets for the Sweet Potato Festival.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you.